will last forever. Together forever. This will last forever. Joined together when God is joined together. Nothing or no one can put asunder. This will last forever. Together forever. This will last forever. Joined together when God is joined together. Nothing or no one can put asunder. This will last forever. Together forever. This will last forever. Joined together when God is joined together. Nothing or no one can put asunder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marriage and Ministry, where we focus on encouraging those in relationships, particularly marriages, to walk in their roles as unto the Lord, worthy as unto the Lord. And so we know marriage can be difficult, but marriage is worth it. It can be hard, but it is definitely worth fighting for. And so marriage and ministry is where we come and just talk about marriage and how we should see it and how we should operate in marriage. The focus of today's show is we're going to talk about the balance of marriage and ministry. So I have the executive pastor of Word Tabernacle Church, Pastor Kyle Johnson, on the show. Now, I brought him on because both of us serve in the roles as pastor here at Word Tabernacle Church. Both of us have families. We have young families. We're both married. We have young families. We're both in school. We're both pursuing advanced degrees. We both have very extensive roles when it comes to our pastorship here at Word Tabernacle Church. But I'm a mother and wife. You're a husband and a father. Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Soares, Dr. DeForest Soares, is that his name? That's right. Okay, good. During our E4 conference, he said something during the leadership luncheon that really got my wheels turning. He said that balancing marriage and ministry or balancing ministry and family is impossible. There's no such thing. Mm-hmm. He said you can't because it would suggest that both are equal. Mm-hmm. So if you have 10 pounds in one hand, that means you have to have 10 pounds in another hand, and marriage and ministry or family and ministry is not equal. Yeah. I have heard other people say that, like the working moms coach, Robbie Green, she says that all the time. And so my wheels got to turning because I feel like I'm always in this intentional effort to balance both. Mm-hmm. Because both have demands, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it feels like both have heavy demands. Yeah. But I want to meet them both. Mm-hmm. So when you were in the same room, you were at the same luncheon. Mm-hmm. When he made that comment, what were your thoughts?
I was thinking, yeah, he's right. Because one, what he said was absolutely correct. Balance has this idea that you have to have equal weights in order to be able to balance and level. But I think that the other dynamic he said in terms of finding the rhythm, I've heard that before, and I think that's really important because there's always going to be times like if I'm trying to find balance, I work on different points of strength and different points of synergy and in gravity in order to figure out the balances. But with rhythm, I can put all of me into a spot as long as I figure out what the dance is, and I can go into these different spaces. I think that it does come around with rhythm, and not just with ministry, but with anything, right? There's going to be times where you're going to have to spend a little bit more time here. This week is going to be crazy hectic with all of your obligations outside of the home. And so you prepare for the home for that, but then you jump in on that week. And then the next week, you may have no obligations outside of the home, and you're all in and being able to balance and spend time in that space. And I think that when it comes down to it, a lot of marriages struggle when you don't have a good rhythm, where it's all just, you're just dancing with two left feet, mm-hmm. you know, and it's like something's off. Because you're always out of the home, or you can't be effective in your ministry or can't be effective at work because you're always using family as an excuse to not do that, when you really have to figure out what is the rhythm for you in your home.
Have you and Danielle found your rhythm?
Yes, always finding. I think the songs change.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. One thing that I love about Danielle, and we've been married now for 12 years, is that she didn't try to change the man she married. And I think oftentimes when we enter relationships, whether it be because you specifically with ministry, you marry someone and then later on they join ministry, they become Christians or they start working for the church or whatever. It's not always, I know what I'm getting up front. So I think that that's important. But she also married a man that she knew, I wasn't in full-time ministry when we got married. I was a teacher. She knew that I was gonna be that person who's plugged into a lot of stuff all the time. And she didn't say, okay, now that we're married, I know that your heart for people, your heart for community, your heart for students, I want you to now stop that. That's the stuff that drew me to you. That's the stuff I was attracted to because I saw the compassion, the commitment to Jesus, and the commitment to the church. But now that we're married, I want you to completely change the song. She knew me. And I think that now that we had to find the rhythm, there were some disappointments. There were some frustrations, there were some confusions, and I think miscommunications. You're going to step on each other's toes every now and then, but you figure out what works for you.
And I think that that is so true. I agree with that. Jason and I are finding. I think it's an ever evolving process
Absolutely.
To find that rhythm, the song that works best for the season. That's very important. The challenge with ministry is it's just not you and Danielle and the girls. It's just not me, Jason, and my children. Other people are involved.
Yeah.
And so, it's sort of like when you're on the dance floor and you're grooving, and the DJ just changed the song out of nowhere. The song that don't make sense. It's like, did you not see us on the floor? Everybody was hyped. You come in and change a song, and you kill the vibe. I think that, sometimes in ministry, because other people are involved in ministry, that sometimes they can enter the equation and change the song. How do you deal with it? And an example could be, and I know life happens, so I'm not minimizing any of the circumstances, like a death or someone goes to the hospital, or we have to rush to the church to focus on a community event. Like those things that just you had set the playlist and it changes.
I think that this pulls on, especially when you got the idea of people that aren't in the relationship impacting it, and circumstances and situations. I think the first thing is that you, as a spouse, whatever role you play in your household, but as a spouse, you have to be understanding of the other person. I think empathy and understanding go a long way. When you realize that, if you marry a doctor and they're on call, it may be a little frustrating to you, but you also know the nature of their work, the nature of their passions, and you have to be understanding that, this person might die if my husband or my wife doesn't miss this dinner. So it's like, part of it is just understanding dynamics. I think another part is people realizing the weight of those who are serving in ministry. And I think that can help out a lot. And of course, we're pastors, and so, our work in ministry might be different from a person who serves in the ministry, like you're a greeter, so we may have more calls on us, especially with funerals and things like that. But the greeter may be called on just as much in a week away from their family as someone else.
Right.
And so I think that other people should be understanding that, yes, this person is here to serve the church. Yes, this person has a passion to serve the church. I also understand that person has a family. So I'm going to do my best to not call them at certain times of night. I'm going to do my best to only lean on them or pull on them when I need them, not just because I want them. If someone else in the church can do it, I'll go to that person. Or for someone. So I think that the church as a whole should be, I think, sensitive to the needs and the realities and the families of people who are serving in the church.
And I think that goes, that is, I'm learning my role and my responsibility to help educate people and to help kind of teach people about me and my boundaries. But I'm learning that boundaries are different than fences. So a lot of times we put boundaries up to keep other people out, but boundaries are to guard you. And people can come, like offensive, like, oh, wow, you never want to seem unapproachable or unavailable, but those guards for you. How do you communicate that to the people? Like, I'm a pastor, I'm here for the people, but the people can only come but so far.
Listen.
Right. And I think about when Jesus was talking to the crowd, and he took the boat and went out.
Yeah.
From them. He separated himself from them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need to have that separation. But how do you do that with not offending people? And I guess offense is on the other person's side more than yours.
Yeah. Well, I think the two-part side of it, trying not to be offensive, but then also perception of how people perceive things can come off as offensive. I think that setting a boundary is really good, especially when you communicate what it is, but also it's okay to communicate why. I think a lot of times, we can get into this space in any role where I don't have to tell you why. I'm just telling you I'm not showing up. And you know what? You have that right? You have that right. But here's the deal. You could tell me why, and it can help me function better in the future. Mm-hmm. So I don't try to cross that boundary again. Because, I'm a photographer. We have a photography business. And you'd be amazed at how people approach wedding photography because they aren't educated on how it functions. But when we tell them, it costs this much because of this and this and this, they go, oh, that made lots of sense. And they then adjust their expectations, they adjust their needs, their desires. And I think that so when we're creating boundaries in the church, we're creating boundaries in ministry, I think that it's important for you to understand why the boundary exists. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we can say, well, I don't do this because I just don't want to. But why don't you want to? Right. And sometimes our boundaries aren't necessarily healthy for us. They're just a rule we created because we thought we needed it. But reality is you just need to approach things differently in order for that function to work well. Right. So I think that when I set boundaries, it's a lot of times people tell me I can be like, I'm 10 toes down on everything. Yeah. Like when I come to a conclusion about something, I'm like, this is what I stand on, right? Right. But I think that what it does is I create boundaries in my life for my family and for me. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, me doing those boundaries helps protect the church. Mm-hmm. It helps protect those who I'm serving because I can get burnt out. We can get worn out. We can get to the point where we no longer even like serving, and serving becomes more of a chore than a passion. Mm-hmm. And so creating the boundaries are necessary. And I think that anytime that you feel an inclination of something that's how I go, I don't like the spark of that, right. Go ahead and fix it and adjust it so that, and I say this, boundaries can change. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And if your spouse tells you, hey, so I'm kind of missing this dynamic or this is going on, adjust that, And sometimes your boundaries aren't about you. Sometimes your boundaries are what my spouse is allowed to be exposed to. Right. The expectation, like Jason didn't sign up to be an associate pastor. Right. Danielle's not an executive pastor. Right. So like my kids aren't executive pastors. And so it's like I think expectations on what goes on our children and our families, we also have to create the boundaries to protect them. So you might want my wife at lots of things. You might want my wife to engage with you the way I engage with you, but no, I'm setting a boundary for her in order to protect her, my family, and the church. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And that's good. And speaking of the children, I often hear a lot of times PK kids, they, rebel against the church because they were always at the church and they were, made to do things. And I said, I hear that because I haven't experienced that, but you hear it. I mean, you have PK organizations, you have conferences for pastors and preachers, you have whole conferences for PK. And I understand that is a very interesting role to be in. And like you said, the kids didn't sign up to, they are just they're your daughters, they're my children. And they are in that role. How do you help, one, specifically the children, protect and cover them, but also educate, cultivate them when it comes to the church, that balance and, help creating a personal passion that they have for the church and not necessarily because they're your children, they have to do certain things. Like, Have you thought about that, or have you seen yourself intentionally doing some effort toward that with your children?
Yeah. One, Lord, please bless my children. Bless the babies.
Bless,
All right, bless them.
bless,
So here's the,
bless.
I hear so much about pastors' kids, but interestingly enough, I find that the pastor kids are just the same as everyone else's kids. The issue, from my perspective, and I'm not a pastor's kid, I think oftentimes the issue isn't that the child is this rebellious kid who is overly sinful and it's just that people put them on a pedestal because there's people, the church and community says, you're supposed to act like a pastor. The kid, you're supposed to act like a pastor. So you might be doing things that everyone else is doing in your generation, but because you're the pastor's kid, you're supposed to act like the pastor. And I think that that's the problem. So part of my thing is to protect my children from false expectation.
Right.
And so there's gonna be balance of lots of stuff, but I'm always gonna tell my kids, everybody makes mistakes. Like that's been something I've been telling them since they're infants. And if I go to say, who makes mistakes? Right now they say, everybody makes mistakes. The important thing is that you learn from it and that you do something different to make it better in the future.
Right.
And I'm gonna apply that for everything. As far as and I'm gonna tell you, I'll tell you this, friends, okay? I need you to not put an expectation on someone that you don't want on yourself.
Right.
And we oftentimes put expectations on children that we as adults don't even want to have or put on us. And so I think everyone in the church should act like a Christian. If you are a believer, you should act like a Christian. And we're all hold each other accountable to act like one. And if that means it's the pastor's kid, or if it means it's a new person who's a Christian, whoever, everyone has the same standard of accountability. Now, the other thing is we do a lot here at Word.
We do a lot.
Like, we got a lot going on. Like, I think, but I'm also so thankful because my children's community is here. One that they like, so kids that they have grown up with that are their best friends, that if they're going to be on Duo together or video chat, it's the kids that they want to be around.
Right.
So I don't have to force my children to be here. If they were sick, matter of fact, this past weekend, they didn't come to church because Olivia was feeling sick and she was so sad. She was like, but I need to go to church so I can talk to God. And Kendall said, Olivia, you can talk to God anywhere. You can talk to God here.
Right.
And they had like this whole deal and they miss coming here for Sundays, for Bible study, for after school program. But I was warned. I was given a warning by a couple of people that, your church has a lot going on. So my kids, Olivia came here at the Impact Academy preschool. She came to the church for that. She's now in elementary school, but she also comes for the after school program. They have dance here on Monday night. Olivia's gonna be joining the children's choir on Thursday night. Then they have Sunday church. They also have Tuesday night Bible study. And we're also starting Girl Scouts. And so the Girl Scouts will be here, right? And some people say, well, you have to be careful that they're always at the church. And I'm thinking, I hear what people are meaning by that, but I'm also thankful that they're always at the church.
Wow, yeah.
Because the church is cultivating their dance. The church is cultivating their talents in singing. The church is cultivating healthy community in a safe space with phenomenal adults that they can look and say, I know this person and that person. And when we look at people who grow up in the church, I think that the struggle is not that they grew up in the church. I think the struggle is that false expectations were put on them and boundaries were put on them and they weren't allowed to grow as individuals. And so for me, it's less about trying to limit their exposure to always being at church and more about reinforcing their individuality and helping to disciple them as individuals in Christ. I think that's key.
How do you explain the church to Olivia, Kendall? How do you, and I'm naming those two because I know they are at age to grasp the concept.
Emery's one, she doesn't quite get it.
Right. How do you explain the church? I'm thinking about conversations I've had with Maya and Jace and McKinley. And one of the things someone said, it was one of the young ladies who used to do her hair a while back, not her new beautician, a while back. And she was saying, you need to keep her, have her here regularly so we can keep, she's growing locks. And I think they're very pretty. And she needs to get her done regularly because she already has a mark against her for being a pastor's child. Like, that's already something that people can pick her. No, she said she's already different because she's a pastor's child. So we don't need to add hair problems with it. You know what I'm saying? And I got it. I mean, the lady who said is a very sweet lady. I don't think she meant anything by it because she's a very sweet lady and she loved McKinley. McKinley loves her. But I was like, wow, do people look at pastors' children like that? And so my question is, how do you define the church and help Kendall and Olivia understand the church? Their relationship to the church based on their different roles. One, as a Christian. Two, their father is a pastor, right? Or do you just kind of let it organically let them come into knowledge and understanding of the church?
That's great questions. You have really good questions. All right, so I'd say both, right? So one is my kids had to, they remind themselves, oh yeah, Daddy, you're a pastor. I was like, yeah. They're like, but you're not pastor. I was like, no, I'm not pastor.
You pastor,
they said,
sir.
to be clear, all right? I was like, yes, I'm not the pastor, all right? But I think that their connection to the church is the same thing I teach in our preteen and youth Bible study. The church is the individual. The church is the local gathering of individuals. And the church is the universal worldwide, everyone who's a believer. And so for Olivia, it was through conversation, I've seen her shift. Like she at one point was calling, her God teacher. So she was coming to school for the preschool, right, at the Impact Academy, and that's Miss Hines is my teacher. And then when she would come to the same classroom, because it's in the same space, for Sunday church, she would say, that's my God teacher.
God teacher.
So it's like, because that teacher teaches me about God, right? And so in her world, she makes distinctions about what's being covered when she's in the building.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so if she's here for a birthday party, because we also have birthday parties here, right?
Yes.
If she's here for a birthday party, she's just going to a birthday party. So I see them making the distinctions in the building, and they make the distinctions socially about what's happening. As far as their role as a Christian, Olivia, she's 5. We've been working with the gospel with her. Not sure she's not at the point of understanding the gospel,
right.
but Kendall has made a decision to become a Christian. And so when I talked to her about the church as the person you are, and so she understands that concept and is ever learning more and more about what that concept truly means. But I also love that because in the church, because we're made up of so many individuals, she sees her dance ministry teacher, Jasmine Clark. So Monday, Jasmine's in here with them on the stage, and they have their prayer journals, and they go through all of a sudden their accountability and affirmations, and they're learning about praise and dance. Then during the summer, Jasmine has a dance camp. She has a business of her own that she teaches all the dancing and flips and splits and all that stuff. So Kendall is able to see the church represented in the community and in ministry. And she doesn't see two types of people. Right. Jasmine's the same here as she is in her dance studio.
Yes, she is.
And it's all beautiful.
Yes.
And so things I love about the church and getting them plugged in and helping them to understand what it means to be the church is that you don't have to be at the church to be the church.
Right.
But there is still a specialness in the building that the church uses. And so they're ever learning and growing. And the other piece is that, I definitely just kind of let some stuff happen organically. And as they say things, I'll chase that rabbit with them.
Right.
To help them kind of grasp the concept.
Right. And I was laughing because Maya was so excited about serving for the E4 conference. And they served.
Yes,
Them
they
babies
did. They served.
Served. Plastic gloves and all. Right? So Monday, we were off after the E4 conference. And Monday we were off. And Maya was sick. I think she was more tired. And her response was, my body would probably just need to rest because I've served all weekend, right? And she was serious.
Yes.
And sister girl slept the whole day. Now, she did, teachers who are watching, she did have a cough, a congestion, and all of that. But I think, your body is more susceptible to colds and stuff when it's tired.
Yeah.
And I was trying to have a conversation with her about the joy of serving, and, and just not because I grew up old school and it was work kind of based, religion based, but, my mom and dad, I've talked about this developed a love for the church, that I had to find and appreciate. And once I did, I'm like, oh, thank y'all for having me at everything. Mm-hmm. But more so it was do this in the church and not be this as the church. You know what I'm saying? Like, do this in the church. And you found, not in my family or per se my church, but just in old school church, like contradictions. You have contradictions in them.
Absolutely.
And they're played out on the screens of social media.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Thank you for tuning in to Marriage and Ministry. Tune in next time as I continue the conversation with Pastor Kyle about balancing marriage and ministry.